Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the StrategEast live event on digital transformation of SMEs in the Eurasia region. My name is Sebastian-A Molineus. I am the country director for the World Bank for the South Caucasus region. And as such, deeply steeped on a number of economic issues, but in particular, an issue that is very close to my heart, which is the issue that we're talking about today, which is again the digital transformation of SMEs. It is truly a great pleasure for me to serve as your moderator today for a very simple reason, is that we have a fantastic panel that is going to be discussing this topic today. Let me just quickly introduce all three of them to you. To begin with, we have Eric Hontz from CIPE, who is the Deputy Regional Director for Europe and Eurasia. We have Ihar Kruhlik, who is a representative of EPAM systems and who focuses on SMEs digital development. And last but not least, we have Ketevan Meparishvili, I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, who is from TWINO and who is TWINO's regional manager for the Asia region. Before turning to the panelists, actually, let me quickly, because we are a bit short of time, go quickly to the three questions that I would like to ask the panelists. Before doing so, I wanted to quickly remind everyone to please mute yourself. And also when you ask questions, please, of course, unmute yourself and make sure that you can introduce who you are and then direct your questions to one of the three panelists. The first question I would like to start off by asking Eric. Eric, we know that most large enterprises are able and have the resources to invest heavily in digital transformation and can adopt unique technological solutions for their firms. But what about small and medium-sized enterprises who may not have access to such technologies or cannot afford the expenses with adopting these kind of technologies? Eric, it'd be great to hear your perspective on this particular first question. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Sebastian, and it's great to be here. There's kind of two perspectives of this, right? There's the perspective that yes, it's an additional cost, but two, that it's a cost savings. Over the past 15 years, there's been a relatively robust pipeline of B2B services in the tech space that has transformed the sector and allows small businesses to operate as big businesses would. While a lot of the solutions aren't necessarily off the shelf, they can be customized in a relatively cost-efficient manner. And that, services such as cloud computing and larger businesses that cater to small businesses have really allowed small businesses to integrate a lot more seamlessly with multinationals, with large international partners, and to really speak the same language. So there are a number of B2B solutions that are relatively off the shelf, that are relatively inexpensive. Yes, it is a cost to kind of bring them into compliance or bring them up to standard and integrate with your own business. But just like anything, there is a cost involved. The missing piece here might be some either government regulation or standards that are imposed by government that don't necessarily match from country to country, or some accounting standards, or there might be some issues with data management and the cost that's involved not being eligible or not being able to be financed easily through access to capital issues that are a common problem throughout the region and throughout the world for small businesses. So there could be some policy solutions in there to open up the flow of capital for these tech solutions. There could be a tech solution to the flow of capital problem itself. And there also are some policy solutions out there for countries to better integrate their accountancy standards and other kind of, let's say, business standards to allow these platforms, these B2B solutions, to be more easily integrated across countries. So I'll let my esteemed colleagues talk a little bit further about any specific solutions.
Thank you so much, Eric. And why don't we go next to Ketevan or Keti? Do you want to come in on this question as well, please? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Sebastian. Greetings. Pleasure to be part of this event. I would like to address the most important part when we are talking about the small and medium-sized enterprises, why specifically they cannot afford such expenses. I would say, first of all, we need to emphasize the importance of awareness on digitalization and need recognition from the small and medium-sized enterprises. If companies do not see the value of utilization of the digital tools, then of course, the expenses, no matter what is the volume of it, seems irrelevant for any of them. Since I'm representing a fintech organization, one of the recent research area was Georgian SME sector study, for example. And I would say, despite the fact that numerous governmental and private organizations are offering educational facilities on digitalization, still awareness from smaller companies is very low. And most of them are even mixing digital transformation process as a utilization of digital marketing tools that primarily serves as a customer acquisition channel and not covering operations management part at all. If there is a recognition of the need, of course, there is a plenty of resources internationally that are offering, for example, a subscription-based cloud services for different type of businesses. And but at first, small and medium-sized enterprises must define what type of solution they need, and only afterwards judge about the expenses. Majority of them even do not possess the information about the available data within their organization they possess. And so the first and major gap I would have outlined we are facing on the example of the Georgia is education. And needs recognition, and secondly, of course, the financial capabilities of the small and medium-sized enterprises. Demand are on the following solutions for digitally thrived companies. It's collaborative services, it's teleworking, project management software platforms that are module-based, also cloud ERP and CRM softwares. The uprising trend is electronic invoicing services, inventory management, digital signatures, and of course, digital procurement solutions. In Georgia, several small and medium-sized enterprises are using like ERP solutions, but if we look at a larger scale, what the enterprises are lacking is the web-based exchange platforms and marketplaces. Where actually simply you can just like a click, filter the category and choose the right solution for your business. I would say that the similar, the solution was implemented during COVID-19 by the European Union. It calls digital SME. That is a consolidation of the digital solutions and services, and the organizations are able to find the appropriate tools to improve a particular situation. And that would have been also a tremendous solution for the countries in the Caucasus region, particularly in Georgia as well.
Thank you, Keti. And before I turn to Ihar to answer the same question, just a quick follow-up question, if you allow. So you spoke about inventory management, electronic procurement, ERP solutions as potential, sort of tech adoption, and one of the barriers is awareness raising, the education of these SMEs and the leaders of these small firms. Do you know of any good examples or of such awareness raising campaigns and education campaigns to ensure that they do have knowledge of these existing tools that are out there? Can you provide any examples of this?
I would say that on a governmental level, for example, Enterprise Georgia and Innovative and Tech Park, we are having huge mentorship campaigns that are on a monthly basis, are holding workshops, trainings, short-term, long-term educational programs that are helping to increase the capacity of the digitalization and need recognition from the companies. Also, the companies itself who are involved in ICT solutions that are widely spread all around the Georgia, they are themselves picking up from the even the school age of the participants. They are training them, enhancing the capacity in terms of IT solutions, data science, engineering, and etc., so that they are able to afterwards to utilize all of the digital possibilities. And I would say that this it's like a first steps, like a newbie for Georgia, and of course we need some common solutions together with the educational enhancement, of course.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for providing that very lucid example. And I know that we at the bank have been working together with Enterprise Georgia, with JITA as well, and I'm familiar with a lot of these awareness raising campaigns. And it's great, by the way, to see a little bit of the peer-to-peer learning that's taking place. I think the best way of doing it is sharing this knowledge is by, one SME, head or CEO teaching others as well. So that's fantastic. Ihar, can I get your thoughts on this particular question? Again, I remind the audience, the question that we're trying to answer here is how we know that large enterprises have the resources to be able to adopt and invest heavily in these digital transformations and the technologies. What about SMEs that cannot afford them? How can we help them? Ihar,
Sure.
over to you.
So first, I need to make a small disclaimer. I have been working in digital transformation domain for the past 5 or 6 years. So I have a bias that all the companies around have already gone through digital transformation right now, and it's more about accelerating this change. But back in 2016, I remember there was a research that said that around 70% of all the companies, small and medium companies, had this strategy underway. Back then, it simply meant using technology in innovative way, and basically driving your costs down, your sales up, and increasing your productivity of your employees. But right now, it has grown up into a real body of knowledge. There are literally courses at universities and business schools on digital transformation alone. You can imagine it as a bookshelf with different volumes on cloud computing, agile transformation, enterprise architecture, whatever. At the same time, if we get down to real life, I also see that the gap between the ambition and execution is unfortunately widening. So at EPAM, our company, our mission is to help companies navigate these waves of technology. And there are similar patterns between successful transformations, and they certainly help to make your investments better. The first, when you talk to a business owner or decision maker, the first question is, and I think that Katy was mentioning that, is that they should understand why they need this transformation and what they are going to transform into. This is basically the leadership question. You have to align your business, for example, marketing, finance, and production, and the same vision should be shared between all of them. Second, those people should be able to formulate it in under 2 minutes and without using the corporate language. It's like a common practice, and it's usually fine to say that we pursue a cohesive solution that would drive customer value by the means of democratizing technological landscape. This is all okay, but at the same time, your salespeople and engineers, for example, might not understand that this concerns them as well, and they will simply go, whatever, and continue with their day-to-day activities. And the last one is that you have to treat transformation not as costs, but as an investment. And you have to attach certain KPIs and be very specific and selective with them. For example, if you have a statement that our product should be flexible and secure, that really is not very helpful, because nobody really wants unsecure and unscalable product. But if you put it, for example, in there, we want scalable, secure product, but security always comes first. This is something that engineers can work with. And going down to the question about costs, there was really an interesting trend with this before this corona situation. It was very common to have 1 year plus 2 year plus projects where we basically we're building online presence, e-commerce solutions. But right now, different companies, different providers have come up with propositions where they are eager to build a complete online solution, online store in 4 or 6 weeks. And there are several such companies, for example, Magento, for example, Shopify, Commerce Tools, and others. And the last remark, maybe if the costs are your primary concern, it is definitely worth looking at open source. There are certain solutions, for example, in content management domain, like Drupal or WordPress. They are on par with market leaders, and at the same time they have no licensing costs at all, and basically you can spend those money that were allocated for the licensing to have better graphical design or to have custom tailored functions which are suitable for your business.
Thank you, Ihar. Also allow me a quick follow-up question. So I agree with everything that you say, but I would argue that much may be more relevant for small and medium-sized enterprises that are in larger urban settings that have access, to these universities of technologies, consultancies, and other firms that can help them navigate this maze and explain the value proposition as you've just very elegantly laid out. What about some of the small and medium-sized enterprises in more rural areas that are a little bit more disconnected from a lot of these product offerings and again, the awareness raising and the education that comes along with the understanding of why this matters? What advice do you have for some of these small and medium-sized enterprises in these more rural areas?
Yeah, so going back to this question of education, if you go online, there are currently a plethora of different online courses, and if you go to Coursera, some other mass educational platforms, there is a lot talking about this transformation right now. There are also books, there are also conferences and panels discussing this like we are doing right now. And basically, there are also incubators and organizations that will help you with that. So I guess the question is not where to get information, but whether you are willing to get that information and whether you have this courage to transform, because obviously all transformation is hard and it's mostly about culture change. So it's definitely easy to do things as you were doing them always, but if you definitely need to change, and if you see that circumstances are changing, as it, for example, right now, it could be easier to transform.
Thank you, Ihar. And I guess that one important public policy response is making sure that the digital infrastructure is there for people to be able to access, in particular SMEs in rural areas, to be able to access these kind of events, online services, etc., and thus to have access to these kind of technologies and to help them understand the business case as to why this is important. So thank you for that clarification. Let me turn to the second question. Sorry, Eric, you wanted to come in. Please go ahead.
Sebastian, I just wanted to chime in here about education, and a key facilitator of education in a variety of industries are associations, and that's CIPE's primary partner. In Belarus, they have a great association of high-tech manufacturers, which provides a lot of educational materials and connections with other manufacturers around the world. So the strength of a country's or a region's associations really pushes that education program down, from the urban centers all the way into the most rural community, as long as you have an internet connection, and those associations can kind of weed through the educational opportunities and really present the best offerings and connect folks.
Thank you, Eric. Great point, and fully agree. A critical enabler to be able to also reach just a massive of SMEs. As we know, there are hundreds of thousands of SMEs in most countries. They often make up 80–90% of all firms in a particular country. Reaching them effectively is, of course, critical. And you're absolutely right. It's one thing to use the digital technologies, but working through associations, using them as platforms for education, et cetera, in particular in combination with online platforms, is a very powerful tool. So fully agree. Let me now turn to the second question that I'd like to ask the panelists. And I'll start off with you, Keti, this time around. Do you know of any, and I almost hate to say this word, off-the-shelf solutions that might be available for SMEs in their journey to digitally transform themselves? And perhaps you have some good practice examples from the Eurasia region that you might be able to share with the audience. And then I'll turn to you, Ihar, afterwards, and followed by Eric. Thank you.
Well, there is a rising trend of one-stop shop solutions to improve the establishment, management, promotion, and the expansion of the businesses. I would say geodata and open data services and digital notarization platforms, that enables the companies to prove the authenticity of the documents and solve problems related to the privacy and storing the GDPR compliance modes. Those type of systems are blockchain-based smart solutions, and also deep learning platforms and payments with cryptocurrencies. Since I'm from fintech sector, and I would emphasize also need of the financial inclusivity. We all know that COVID-19 leads to widespread bank branch closures and moving customer from offline to online. That was like the huge digital transformation for offline financial actors. However, still there is a progress to be made on the accessibility of the financial services. 1.7 billion adults are still remain unbanked globally, and the huge proportion of that number is coming from the Asia Pacific region. And this is an incredible opportunity for digital disruptors, of course, to leverage the technology and provide some financial solutions. And if we will take a closer look at the situation right now in the Asia Pacific region, more people are expected to turn to financial resources. And of course, all of these traditional ways of proof of income and financial scoring, simply we need to create a solution that are serving the unserved segments. And moreover, the governmental aids were turned out to be dismissed to the individuals and the self-employed people because there was no mechanism in which to receive that help, especially in Asia, where a large proportion of the population remain unbanked. So I would say that this is ringing a bell for the government to push their financial aid and, of course, their strategic mindset into creating a single-side, one-stop shop solution, so that in a situation like that we already got in during COVID-19, the companies that are operating offline, no matter the sector, quickly can switch into the marketplace that is a web-based solution, and of course they can take all of the goods of such a provided solutions. Now I would say, of course, there was for example, during this pandemic period, India, for example, pushed some non-banking solutions to quickly disburse the money. They are using UPI services as an example I can provide. And the option can be also a cloud-based services, so that you are creating a virtual payment address that is giving you the possibility to send a unique identifier link on their mobile phone and with encrypted banking ID. So there are majority already ready-made solutions. It's all about the questions, who needs that and how to tackle those needs.
Great, thank you, Keti. Ihar, your thoughts, please. Off-the-shelf solutions, tailored solutions. How do we provide support in some good practice example in Eurasia? Thank you.
Right. So my background is in software engineering, so I can say a few words about the current trends that was on the news for the past several years. Maybe the first one to talk about is conversational UI, and to put it in simpler terms, it's chatbots. There are literally hundreds of thousands of chatbots on Facebook alone. This is a very commonly spread technology, and again, talking from my experience in our company, we have built several chatbots for different companies. For example, the first one was a support assistant agent, and basically it served as a first line to take the question, to route it to an appropriate specialist, and maybe in some cases just to pull up the necessary FAQ page. For another company, that was an online store selling car tires. That was a shop assistant. It was much more complex. Basically, if you assume this scenario when the user asks for a set of tires, he can say or she can say that I need a set of tires or a set of car wheels. So the system has to identify the intent, although the user can use synonyms and different other words. So in the end, this is a solution. This is a blend between search engine, smart navigation, and taxonomy. It will drive you through the set of questions. For example, what type of car are you using? Is it an SUV? Is it a sport car? What is your budget? And ultimately drive you to a purchase. Another trend was speech recognition and voice assistants. All major providers such as Microsoft, Apple, Google, and even Yandex, they have built their own systems. And we see that the use cases are right now very different and very interesting. For one company that are selling contact lenses, we had a following use case. User takes a photo of a package of a contact lens, or simply scans a barcode or QR code. The system recognizes the product and understands that this package is good to go for another 30 days. In 30 days, a user asks, Alexa, what is in my to-do list for today? And Alexa replies, here's your reminder. You are running out of contact lenses. Would you like to make a purchase? And the user may reply yes, and the system will place an order automatically, and you will receive your contact lenses at your door or at the pharmacy, depending on the legislation. And one final trend is about augmented and virtual reality. This is an interesting one. Some people still think that it is immature and that it is a toy. But talking about toys, Pokemon Go has made $3 billion in revenue just on this simple idea. So again, we had many projects based on augmented reality. For example, one for logistics company. It was automation for the warehouses. Basically, you put on your glasses and the system helps you to navigate the warehouse. It helps you to identify the correct boxes, and it also helps you to put the boxes in the package in the most efficient way. Another one was for electric engineering company. It's helped to assemble complex appliances. Let me describe it in the following way. Let's say you bought a sofa or a table from IKEA. The system will show you where you need to put your bolts, your nails. It's all in virtual reality. And this simply made their productivity much higher. What I'm trying to say is there are so many solutions. Some of them are free of charge. Some of them are open source. That it's more question of understanding what is your actual business case and how you want to implement it. If we divide, for example, even personalization, right now it's more important to talk not just about personalization, but about customer 360 view. The system can take demographical, economical profile. It can also know about your job position, about weather, about device you are using, and maybe about point of sales you're currently in. You take all this data and then perhaps you can split all the systems into three large categories. The first is CRM, customer relationship management. This is primarily for salespeople, where you have first-party data about purchases, about registration, credit cards, so on and so forth. The second is CDP, Consumer Data Platform. This is the source for data that comes in streams, event streams, and is used primarily for marketeers, for marketing campaigns. And finally, it's DMP, Data Management Platform. This is used by advertisers. This is still primarily cookie-driven and is used for building context advertisement. So again, what I'm trying to say, you have to build your use case and understand in what particular way you have to explore the software which is out there. And a lot of that software is free of charge.
Fascinating, Ihar, and I very much appreciate the fact that you've taken a lot, common buzzwords, virtual reality, big data, and you've brought them down to very practical and pragmatic use cases and how they're being put to use for the betterment of and the support of SMEs in very practical manners. And I can certainly tell you, being an owner of IKEA shelves in the background, having, I think, trying to get past the very complex instructions and having the opportunity to look at virtual reality sort of instructions to help assemble things, and then being facetious, of course, I think it would be greatly welcomed. And I'm sure these kind of solutions for SMEs are of great use as well. So thank you for that. Eric, can I have your thoughts on this question?
Sure. And so what we've seen over the past 6 months, in my opinion, is just a continuation or acceleration of trends we've seen before this pandemic. And two that I'd like to highlight as relate to SMEs are the contactless payment trend. We'd already seen in Ukraine in particular some of the highest uptick or uptake for small and medium-sized enterprises in contactless payments. Nobody wants to dig out their credit card or their debit card. Everywhere from the tiniest coffee shop to the largest retail chains has this technology already enabled. It's a big win for consumer debit card, the bigger companies' consumer debit cards, but it's also a win for SMEs, which can then use that data, because it's all digital, to track their sales better, to control their inventory better, and to use that data to build a better business, because it's all online, and you can easily put it into an electronic form and make your business more efficient and respond to customer demand. The second trend is logistics and supply, and this is primarily is to larger businesses with curbside pickups. So you have a limited opportunity to kind of go into larger chains and just to retail now due to restrictions that have been put in place and are kind of being walked back slowly around the world. But the ability of retail centers to know what they have in stock, to procure it quickly, to replace it quickly, and to deliver it to curbside to a customer for pickup, I think is a trend that we're going to see in retail to continue on. I know that we see it here in the United States, and I think it's going to continue into the rest of the world. Walmart was one of the pioneers of this in this area in technology, and they have one of the most robust data systems in the world, where they can fulfill the anticipated needs of their supercenters and their stores before any human could realize that. The additional ability to kind of go down to the customer level, where the customer in Ukraine, for example, goes to Epicenter and can look at what's in stock, know the stock levels, put together a cart, have a retail associate pull those materials and package it. Is a real innovation that we've seen come about rapidly over the past 6 months. Before it was kind of a niche product, but this is really expanded. Now with the customer now doing all of that online, there's additional opportunities, and Ihar, you'll probably recognize this in EPAM, to upsell to the customers, to track better customer data, because the customer is not physically walking through the store. because they're clicking on things as they go through the retail website. All that data can then be harvested and put together a much more robust customer profile. This is more towards the medium-sized end of the spectrum for the stores or the retail outlets that have that capacity to invest in those resources. But it's definitely a trend that we're seeing, and that's really kind of seen a big bump in a relatively quick amount of time.
Oh, excellent point, Eric, and I fully agree as well that in particular now during the COVID crisis, the ability of companies or SMEs in particular to be able to equip themselves to, as you were saying, go from the more face-to-face interactions with their customers and clients and doing that virtually is, I think, a critical success factor for their very survival. And a lot of firms have, seized upon the opportunities that have come with this crisis. Others are going to be struggling if they fail to do so. So a very interesting, I think, time, and I think, again, a big opportunity. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of firms coming out of this crisis in a much better and stronger position to move forward in line with the sort of building back better model that many are espousing these days. So thank you for those remarks, and allow me to now turn my final question and that I'd like to ask the panelists, and that is, what is the role? So we've been focusing on the private sector, obviously, and SMEs. But what is the role of government? So what can countries, governments, the state, what can they do in terms of legal, regulatory support to help with the digitalization of SMEs? And is there any scope or room for international organizations, financial institutions, development partners to provide support to governments in this respect? Eric, given perhaps I can start off with you, given your role with CIPE, and then I'll turn to Ketty and finally conclude with Ihar.
Sure, Sebastian. Thanks for the question. And this is a key opportunity, specifically for Europe, Eurasia region, with FTAs in place. A lot of companies are looking at, if not reshoring, then reorienting their supply chains. And being neighbors to the European Union, which is a huge market, really presents a really big opportunity, given the cost advantages of Ukraine and Moldova and the Caucasus and Belarus to supply human resources talent, engineering talent, and to be a lot closer in proximity to the European market. At CIPE, we deal with a lot of issues that are related to corruption and supply chain management and compliance issues, integrated compliance issues. And quite frankly, it's a lot easier for a company executive or a compliance professional to get on a plane in Hamburg and go to Lviv rather than go across the world to Shenzhen. And so there is an opportunity for these markets on Europe's doorstep to present themselves as attractive investment opportunities for shortening supply chains. And you can do this through digitalization in a number of ways. And the government side of the solution, there's always been over the past generation, issues with customs. And so moving to an online customs declaration, moving to pre-clearance, CIPE has a trade program called the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation, where we work with governments in the private sector to facilitate this process. And it's a multi-donor, multi-country project. And we engage in different ways around the world based on both the private sector and the government's desire to fix very common sense solutions. And this could be pre-clearance for known import exporters. It could be the digitization of customs. And there's a lot of area for low-hanging fruit to both reduce the costs associated with trade for these markets to position themselves as good partners to EU-based businesses, and for the private sector to engage constructively with governments in pro-market constructive solutions that benefit the domestic market by bringing jobs and opportunity and investment, but also benefit European companies by bringing that supply chain a lot closer to home.
Thank you, Eric. And just a quick follow-up question, if I may, very briefly, in particular when it comes to these supply chains that go over multiple borders. I remember not too long ago, there was a lot of discussion about the role of blockchain in this process and, you know, introducing smart contracts and helping with the custom clearance as a more effective tool and an open tool to, and transparent. You had mentioned that as well as a key priority for CIPE. What is the latest on that? Do you see practical use cases of blockchain for these kind of global supply chains?
So yeah, blockchain is a great technology, and I don't think it's really yet to have realized its full potential, right? If you're a larger business, you have relationships with third parties that number into the thousands, really quickly, and to be able to quickly assess via blockchain technology where those various parties are at in real time is a huge advantage. So, you know, if I were a government or if I were to advise government, I think that, you know, I would invest in looking at policy solutions and policy frameworks that would allow for the integration of blockchain as quickly as possible. I'd also encourage local firms to you know, adopt these technical standards in order to facilitate that process. It's a huge advantage for companies to be integrated with their supplier, with the company that they supply to via blockchain. It gives, you know, if you're sitting again, you know, in Berlin or Paris, it's very comforting to be able to kind of go in real time to your partner in Minsk or your distributor in Minsk and know exactly what's going on there in terms of their financial statements, their production capacity, and other metrics that you can via contract kind of plug into. So there's a huge opportunity there. The e-sign and e-signature, that, you know, is much more, in my opinion, much more advanced, obviously, but blockchain is a huge untapped opportunity. It's been thrown around a lot, but it hasn't been really, you know, implemented just yet.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. And it'll be great to see that move to reality a little bit more and being implemented, as you say. Keti, can I get your thoughts on this? Role of the state, please, on digital transformation. Thank you.
I would say, even though governmental digitalization in Georgia is in a much higher level compared with private sector, still government have an important role to play in creating the right framework, as Eric already mentioned, for digital transformation of the business models, and of course to build up wider ecosystems. Integrated policy approaches are obviously needed to leverage the opportunities of digitalization while also addressing the challenges in minimizing any negative consequences that might emerge. I would say a well-conceived policy approach involves a mix of short-term and long-term initiatives that is fostering conditions to increase digital technology uptake. It will encourage small and medium-sized enterprises participation by reducing the barriers and enhancing the opportunities of digitalization. And it will encourage the new ways of working, new approaches and of the management, and of course, new digital cultures. Efforts can be framed along some multiple trajectories. From my point of view, the government can take a leading role in establishing a framework conditions to support digitally enhanced business models, value chains and ecosystems. First of all, I would say to build a supportive environment to promote a fair competition and encourage innovation. Secondly, facilitate like strategic leadership appointments with specific mandates to evolve business ecosystems and span boundaries. Those trusted intermediaries as so-called role models should be strong leaders in strategic thinkers and encouraging public and private partnerships and collaborations between traditional small and medium-sized enterprises and of course with digitally native enterprises. And education institutions to enhance this gap and knowledge sharing, innovation and diffusion. I would also say that enhance the access of the human resources, skills and informations to improve the awareness of opportunities and the benefits, facilitate uptake of digital technologies. and strengthen the capacity to participate in the new and emerging digital ecosystems. Also, governments and of course international financial institutions can fund the creation of subscription-based software solutions for private sectors in order to support the accessibility and affordability for digital technologies, tools, solutions, and including even initial investments and ongoing costs. And as Eric already mentioned, switch them to blockchain solutions as soon as possible. And what is the most important, I would say, provide with set of measures and KPIs that helps to innovate the business models and management practices, and transform the traditional work practices will of course complement other initiatives.
Thank you so much, Keti. Ihar, final word for you, and then we'll turn over to audience questions, please. Thank you.
Sure. I would second Eric and Keti that blockchain is a huge potential. Basically, when we are talking about smart contracts, it's all about building trust. A lot of businesses and a lot of people are not willing to take their communication, their business or their transactions online because they simply lack trust between the parties. And smart contract, if to put them into simple terms, let's imagine a vending machine. When you put your money inside a vending machine, you expect it to give some product back. So here, vending machine is acting like a smart contract, and basically everybody understands that and everybody trusts it. Same can be done with technology, with smart contract, if we put this into blockchain, and pretty much complicated contracts and transactions can be codified. Basically, we eliminate the need of intermediaries, of arbiters, and this can be done very easily, cheaply, and across multinational borders. I've seen already several projects implemented on blockchain, but as Eric was saying, a lot of them are just like playing with the technology. Maybe more serious case studies were about fraud protection, where you have some unique goods, some unique tokens, or maybe even diamonds, and you attach like a digital passport to it, and the information is stored in the online ledger. But more like day-to-day activities are usually about just distributing loyalty points for different companies. I agree that this is still a very initial state of implementation. And the second point, how the government can increase this adoption and play a major role in the situation. It's my personal view, but I think that government can increase the rate of digital transformation starting with itself. So still a lot of services are face-to-face only, and that involves a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of papers. And if we eliminate that, if we simplify those routes, I think that would be a major step forward, and government officials will understand better what digital transformation is when they go through it themselves.
Thank you so much, Ihar. And I think it's a great last point as well, that awareness raising and education is not a one-way street. It actually needs to happen both ways for the public sector as well. Great, thank you so much for the panelists for a great discussion, for answering, providing great examples to the 3 questions. We have a question from the audience, and the question is as follows. We hear a lot about crowdsourcing these days. Is there such a thing like crowd-generated IT solutions for SME based on open source? What is the role of open data released either by government or by big local players is assisting to generate digital solutions for small and medium businesses? So I think, Ihar, you touched upon this a bit earlier in one of your responses, but nonetheless, it'd be good to get your reflections on this. So anyone want to volunteer to take this question?
Yeah, I can start. So crowdsourcing is a real thing. I guess that the idea of hackathons, of open challenges, was around for a lot of years, and it's like a literal situation in our company. When we announce yet another hackathon, it's even difficult to find volunteers who want to participate because there were so many. Yeah, and I've been organizer, judge, and also a participant on several of them, and they were both for SMEs and for government as well. If you put out an idea, for example, how to improve or how to build a robust idea using open data, how to utilize maps of the city, how to build solutions that can improve urban environment. A lot of people come together, and they come from different environments and backgrounds, and it's like literally possible to build a working solution just in one day.
Thank you, Ihar. Keti, Eric, any additions to make on this question on crowdsourcing?
Of course, I'm gonna add from my side, because crowdfunding and crowd lending, it's also called peer-to-peer lending platforms. It's a marketplace of the lending. And this method is widely used, and the trend is uprising, and where the investors are co-financing the projects by lending money to the borrowers in return for interests. And of course, this technique consolidates a multiple tech solutions, starting from the assessing of the creditworthiness through the machine learning systems, because the important moment is to cut down all the paperwork and touches with the customers. And when we are dealing with money and the borrower and the lender, of course, there you need a state-of-art technological solutions. During a couple of seconds, the process is providing a various data needed by the platforms to review the creditworthiness of the borrowing capacity. And the platforms are evaluating all of the, let's say, within a second, the ability of the fundraising and ability of course, the success rate. The crowd lending platforms are also now in a huge trend in the Asian region right now. We can just like divide them into multiple subdivisions, which is like a real estate, for business, for personal mortgages, for like I would say they are platforms that are coming from the Europe and Asia. So basically, all of those are disruptive technologies that are transforming the traditional, let's say, lending systems into a state-of-art solutions.
Thank you. Eric, go ahead. Yep.
I just add one thing that you know, I've seen a lot of these hackathons and these type of events, and it's true that you know, some people are you know, get kind of tired of them. Where I think that these kind of crowdsourced quick solutions are really helpful is in the social business model or you know, social specter, where you know, profit might not be the primary motivator, but nonetheless it provides a great service, a niche service to wherever you know the problem is being addressed. And it typically, you know, isn't being addressed by the private sector, and it's not being addressed by government. So it's that quasi, you know, government private sector solution where civil society or a socially oriented business really needs to step in. And that's where you get these really innovative ideas from a crowdsource and a diverse section of, you know, private sector folks and web developers and you know, government public policy makers, where they all kind of get in a room together and come up with a solution. It's not the prettiest solution usually, but it usually actually solves the problem.
Great, thank you so much, Eric. We have a few minutes left, and again, I wanted to turn to our audience to see if there are any further questions that that you might have for the audience. You have the opportunity to submit questions via Facebook, and those are then transmitted to us via the chat function. So again, I'll give a quick pause of a few seconds to allow to see if there are any more questions from the audience. So I'm getting a signal that there are no more questions, and if that is the case, then allow me to offer a few concluding remarks and words. To begin with, I wanted to apologize for a bit of a rough start. In fact, what many of you will not know, the moment I was making my introductory remarks, literally the entire computer screen that I had prepared went black. So sometimes we see technology can offer an opportunity, but also pose a certain challenge, in particular when you don't have a backup solution. But fortunately, the link remained. So thank you for your patience with that. So in terms of a summary, just to, allow me to provide a few words. The first is that I think we really started to dig a little bit into this question of what do we mean by digital transformation or digitization. I mean, these are buzzwords in many senses that are freely used. And today we've heard a lot of other quote unquote buzzwords such as big data, virtual reality, hackathons, crowdsourcing, transaction platforms, blockchain, etc. But what I really appreciated is I think we were able to bring these buzzwords down to a very practical sort of use cases, and we can actually see that these are not simply buzzwords, but these are actually used day to day by SMEs across the region to the benefit of the companies themselves in terms of making them more productive, but certainly also in the benefit of the consumers and customers. Highlighted, and certainly we highlighted the use and the opportunities that many SMEs have now during the COVID crisis. At its very simplest, this digital transformation we've learned today sort of might allow SMEs to provide services remotely, the curbside solutions, Eric, that you were referring to earlier. Now, that's not always possible in all cases. So we know that there are hairdressers or bakers that may not be able to provide these kind of services online. With that said, there are other opportunities for them to take online bookings, and have transactions, conducted digitally, and many other use cases, again, that the panelists provided. And while this may seem simple to many of us, and we see many large enterprises that have, freely adopt these kind of technologies, we do know that SMEs at times struggle, and there's some that have, made great use of these digital technologies. Others still have some ways to go, and I think the panelists really have helped to highlight some of the challenges that SMEs face and that policymakers and where the role of the state has an important role to play. So I'm thinking at a very bare minimum of the role of the state in terms of supporting the digital infrastructure, so that not only SMEs in urban settings but also in rural settings have the opportunity to participate and to learn online. We spoke a little bit about the legal and regulatory framework that is necessary, for example, to allow digital payments to take place as well. And I think that's an important role. I recall there was the mention of the need to ensure that data is properly protected, and again, that we have a conducive investment climate and environment to allow this digital transformation to take place. Other issues that were raised, the importance of awareness raising and education for SMEs, in the use of associations in this respect. We heard also from Ihar the very important, the importance of building the business case. This is not something that can be driven top down, but you really need to talk to the entrepreneurs and to make sure that they understand why this is important and why at the end of the day, this will actually make their businesses stronger, more effective, more productive, and more successful at the end. We also heard about the opportunity, Keti mentioned some one-stop solutions by government to support SMEs that are offline and helping them come online. I referred to that earlier. And certainly one aspect that also stuck in my mind in terms of the role of the state is ensuring that there is an appropriate ecosystem in place, appropriate PPPs, and certainly ensuring that there's the competitive or there's a competitive or competition that takes place as well. We see some countries where you have a dominance of very few large players or even SOEs that will actually stifle and suppress competition. So that's an important factor as well, and a point well taken. And finally, we heard, again, the great potential that technologies such as blockchain, et cetera, can play in moving this agenda forward. So with that, I see it's 10:59, at least local time here. So we have 1 minute to go. And I want to use that final minute just again to very sincerely thank the three panelists, Keti, Ihar, and Eric for having joined, fantastic comments, and I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has as well. So again, my sincere thank you and appreciation for taking the time. And once again, apologies for the bit of a rough start. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and the final word of thanks, of course, goes to StrategEast for having organized this platform. My sincere thank you. It's a great platform, and I'm really happy to have served as the moderator. Thank you for the invitation. And once again, thank you for the discussion and for joining. Have a good evening, good afternoon, and a good morning wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Good evening.